I'm Barbara Clark. I am by no means an expert, thank you, Mary. But even though you can grow rhododendrons for a lifetime, you don't become an expert. Believe me, when you own a nursery, things will happen and you won't be able to figure them out. I'm going to just talk about a couple types of propagating. There's many more. I'm going to basically show you how you can do propagating from a cutting or a nurse graft. And I'll explain that as we go along. So here's just a species that I thought would be nice to show. A lot of times I had a specialty, are we moving out of the sound?
I think you just turn your head.
Oh, okay. We had a specialty rhododendron nursery. So what that meant was you couldn't find these back in the day at your box stores. They were truly specialty rhododendrons. And the species and some of the Eucusimanums and those types that Jeannie talked about, we had to graft often. They aren't easily rooted from a cutting. So that said, we're going to go a little over the terminology. Basically, the propagating from rooted cuttings or nurse side grafting cuttings, and then we'll have questions at the end. Understock. So the understock is usually a cutting of a very vigorous growing type of rhododendron. We used to use Cunningham's White or County of York. If you decide to graft, you just want a vigorous grower for your understock. So the hybrid rooted cuttings will root easily, and you want both your understock and your cutting to root. So, and then the scion is the plant cutting originating from the desired mother plant. In other words, you go out in a garden or you go to a friend's garden and say, I'd really like that plant. It's the scion that basically you will be grafting or doing a cutting from. A graft union is the cutting grafting is the method of vegetative propagation where the graft of the plant to be propagated is made from the same time as the cutting of the understock. And then the cambium. So it's important when you're either doing a rooted cutting or doing the grafting that below the bark is the cambium, and you have to get the cambiums, particularly on grafting, to match on your understock. We'll demonstrate this, so you'll see, and then I'll go back through the basically slides. And then the liners are the one-year-old rhododendrons that you set out. And people don't understand sometimes that whether you do a rooted cutting or grafting, it does take time. It can take anywhere from 6 months to a year to get a new rhododendron plant. So some of our tools needed, and the timing of the cuttings, the taking of the cuttings, the storing of the cuttings, the sticking of the cuttings. And sticking, when I talk, that's terminology when we used to just stick them in the soil, and the timing of the new plants. So your tools, you can use a container that is anywhere from a 4-inch to a gallon to a flat. I had obviously a greenhouse. I had 3-foot size beds, high beds, and they had pit rock in them. They had sand and gravel, heat cables, and hardware cloth. And so we were doing this on a very large scale. The growing medium is roughly half peat moss and half perlite. You can buy a bagged propagating soil. You just need to, it needs to be heavier than seedling soil, but you may have to add some peat moss, or I'm sorry, perlite to it. Usually they're too heavy, and you want that lightweightness to let the air move around, particularly when you have grafts. You need very sharp bladed tool, kitchen shears, basically pruners, a utility knife, a razor blade, anything that you become comfortable with. And you'll see when I do this demo, you have to be comfortable with your grafting tool. It can even be an X-Acto knife. We used grafting rubbers, as we call them, or bands, and you can get those readily available still now through your horticulture supply house. And then you need some type of rooting hormone. There, this is, you don't have to have rooting hormone. You can also use, we used to use willow water, but the rooting hormone will stop basically any diseases or fungal, particularly fungal diseases. And then you need, if you're doing home propagating, you're going to need some sort of tenting because you won't have the greenhouse ideal conditions that I had. And that was basically, we took our cuttings in June, we had top mist, and then in the winter we covered them with plastic, basically lids, and we had heat mats. You can do this at home easily, which I'll explain that as we go along. So, time to take the cuttings. There's also, you know, for everything you do, there's always controversy. So the old timers believe fall was the time to take the cuttings. For the nursery business that I was in, we always took our cuttings in June. The most important thing is to remember that it has to be this year's growth, and it has to be not too soft or not too hard. And how do you determine that? Well, it's just practice, practice, practice. You will get where you will realize that your cutting will fail if it was too soft or if it was too hard. Once we took the cuttings from the mother plant that we wanted, we would basically wash them in 10% bleach solution, bag and refrigerate them. Remember to take a marker and to mark your bag, because if you think you're going to remember which rhododendron that leaf looks like, I'm here to tell you, you won't. I field grew, and yes, they become like your children. You can identify them without tags, but at the same time, if I took a cutting, my child got lost in that group. And then we would stick the prepared cuttings in a prepared soil mix. So here I have some excellent photos. These are not my photos, and you'll see on my last slide the source. These are actually from Farmhouse and Blooms. She's an excellent blogger out of Canada, and I highly recommend you follow her on her site. But these are her basically photos of rhododendron fresh cuttings, and these can either be, these are being prepared to root via a cutting or grafting. And so here we're just doing leaf trimming. I will do this in the actual demo. And here's what it looks like after it's been trimmed. You only want a whirl of 3 to 4, 5 leaves. You can snap out the bud. If there's a bud, some type of growth bud or a flower bud, you can snap it out just to send energy into the stem and roots eventually. So here's what it looks like to do a prepared cutting. And this is also an example of both. You can either stick this cutting just as it is, or you can use it as a graft cutting. And there again, I'll show you this during my demo. Here it is closer up. And here it is with some rooting hormone. Now, this is my photo, so you can see the difference. She had them professionally done. But what I was trying to show you is on the left, I've made the slit on the understock to take the graft. In the middle is my scion, basically the plant that I want to reproduce, and I've trimmed it down. It actually will look like this close up. And then on the far right is both the understock and the scion. And because I'm right-handed, we always did our grafts to the right side. I suspect, I don't know this, but if you're left-handed, you would do them on the left, because we would row them out in the beds, and we wanted to make sure they were always on the right side, because a lot of times, once the graft starts pushing new growth, you wanted to make sure that you didn't cut off the wrong side of the plant. You didn't want your understock, you wanted your basically new plant. So, and that's with the band on it.